guys, it's Sugar. Tonight I was talking with my husband Jeff. He's on the show. We wanted to have kind of a podcast feel and kind of just have an open chat about our experience with anime and kind of how it's led to this point for us.
Hello, I'm Jeff. I'm with her.
So why don't you tell us about your starting point in anime, and then I'll get into myself after.
I mean, just for reference sake, I'm in my early 30s, so I was part of the dark ages of anime, the mid-90s Fox debacles that existed there. But, I mean, my first introduction to anime would have been when I didn't even know what anime was as a kid. You know, I watched Astro Boy, which I really enjoyed quite a bit. Speed Racer was on. I mean, it was comical, but I didn't really understand necessarily. You know, this is... I didn't view it as like a different art form. To me at the time, it was just
a cartoon.
Yeah, it was another cartoon, and I was like, well, that's kind of weird looking. But I mean, Astro Boy was very reminiscent of Disney stuff, anyways. So
that's true.
When I first probably got started into like, you know, legit anime and understanding that it's a different art form, it presents itself in a different way than Western cartoons, would have definitely been, again, that mid-90s era of Fox, when they did Escaflowne and they did Card Captors. Pokemon and Digimon both came around the same time. I think Digimon was later into the 90s. Pokemon would have been, God, 96, 97 in there.
Early-ish, yeah.
So, I mean, that would have been probably the first time. First time I would have taken anime more seriously as something that, like, I want to devote more time to this would have obviously been Cowboy Bebop.
Oh, yeah.
I got the chance to watch that, not right as it was airing. In our area of the world, we didn't necessarily get Toonami all the time and things like that. We had, you know, different channels that did different things. As a little insider wink, YTV. If you know YTV, you kind of know what area of the world we tend to hang around in right now anyways. So definitely it would have been Cowboy Bebop, and then from there, in the early 2000s, it was basically just whatever you could get your hands on. So, I mean, a lot of Dragon Ball Z. That was on YTV all the time. As I say, a friend of ours mentioned that he actually remembers watching the original Dragon Ball somehow in our area of the world, which I have no idea how he would have got his hands on it at all. And then, I mean, we would get, and I'm sure lots of people have this same memory too, we had a rental place. I know, right? Like, crazy weird. And they would get like random, just like a 3-episode pack of something, like on VHS. Oh, really? So I would rent that, and it would be like in the middle of some, you know, Martian successor Nadesco. I'd get episodes, you know, 10, 11, and 12 or something like that. I'm like, this looks cool. I have no idea what's going on. This looks really neat.
Yeah.
And then when I was in high school and I met up with some of my friends who I'm still friends with today, we watch anime together. We talk about anime with these friends now. That was probably the big impetus to kind of continue it going, which I'm sure is the same for a lot of the listeners right now and whatnot, that, you know, you hear about certain anime and then you pass that along and they're like, oh, what, you know, I haven't heard of that, but I've heard of this. I've heard of, and, you know, word of mouth kind of goes along. Of course, this was even in the days before, you know, sometimes it was in the days before the internet was even a really big thing. I mean, for some of the younger listeners out there, you have no idea how the internet super helped getting anime. Dear God. Wow. It was really hard before the internet, because the only thing you could rely on is just whatever distributors were willing to bring in.
Yeah.
And lots of times those distributors had no idea, except for the fact, well, it's from Japan, it's anime, somebody will probably like it.
Yeah.
So you would get some of the bottom of the barrel type stuff, and of course you would still take it in and you'd be like, oh, this is amazing, because it was so good, and then you rewatch it and you're like, oh,
that was harsh.
Oh God, it burns my soul just a little bit.
It burns my soul.
Just a little bit. Yeah. So I mean, I suppose, yeah, Cowboy Bebop would have been my first big love. I still watch Pokemon to this day. So I mean, you know, it's not always just that high concept, high plateau.
Yeah.
You know, I own all of Dragon Ball Z, even though, I mean, I would argue now it was a trendsetter, but it's not, you know, the the epitome of great, not even great shonen. It's good. I like Dragon Ball better, and I like lots of other shonen better than Dragon Ball Z. But I mean, on the whole, you know, it's interesting how everything changes as you kind of get more involved and you start realizing, you know, oh, this was just the best of what I could get before.
Yeah, I totally understand that, because when I first started, like you were saying, it was very much like, oh, these are cartoons, but they look different, and you couldn't really put your finger on why. I remember very early on, it was like the Hello Kitty, like you were saying in the 90s, it was the Pokemon, Digimon, Monster Rancher, all that.
Samurai Pizza Cat, maybe.
Samurai Pizza Cat. I never got into that personally, but when somebody showed that to me, I was just like over the moon with like that awesomeness. I was so happy that just existed, let alone just being there.
I was going to say, I missed out on Hello Kitty. I was never the biggest fan of Hello Kitty.
It's actually funny how it started, because my godmother is Chinese, and so anytime she went for trips, she'd always bring me back Hello Kitty items, and that's really where the fixation started. And then we just happened to, when we were going through, actually, like you were saying, rummaging through like video stores, there would just be some random title of like, hey, $2, you get like this Hello Kitty like special, and it's like, sure, I don't know what it is, I don't know if it's in English, but I will take it.
I don't know what you are. You look cute though.
Yeah.
And I like Hello Kitty, so it must be
Kitty's all good.
Fine at the very least. It's interesting that you mention how, you know, you just kind of, you notice, even at a young age, you notice that it looks different. There's something a little bit different, you know, about anime. Because I mean, you know, I find it weird now that I have some nieces and nephews. Again, I'm old. Deal with it. But like some of them are growing up never having seen something like Looney Tunes, which would have been something that I grew up with. And I mean that era of cartoons, you know, that's kind of, I feel like, what shaped cartoons in the West for a long time was, you know, the Looney Tunes and how successful that was. So why would you ever
anything else,
go away from that? Because you know, all of that, and you had all the Hanna-Barbera stuff, which was really, really, you know, it's fine. Like, I don't know if I could ever go back and watch Yogi Bear, but I mean,
it'll always be there, though, you know.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you know, it's interesting how, you know, just immediately seeing something that looks different and it immediately just kind of grabs your eye, and you sometimes associate that with quality as opposed to, you know, the actual quality of the show.
Yeah.
Where, you know, like, oh, and I mean, when you're younger, you know, something looks different. It's animated in a different sort of way. I mean, that's the presentation as a whole for something like Speed Racer. Now, as an adult, I could look at it and be like, wow, that was some of the worst dubbing in an anime in the history of ever. But I mean, at the time when you're younger, you're like, this is something else.
I don't know about the history of ever, but it was special.
It was going for a different audience. It's the same thing with, we were talking about early mid-90s and Fox. Like, Fox brought over something like Escaflowne, which I'm not going to say is, you know, an adult-oriented show or anything like that.
But it was definitely more mature.
It was more mature than what they were trying to lead on, which is why they cut, you know, 2 entire episodes worth of content when they were dubbing it, you know, for the North American audience. Dragon Ball Z, a lot of their more, you know, mature themes were also kind of, you know, chopped a little bit there. And even something like Cardcaptor Sakura, which, don't get me wrong, it has some themes that, you know, you might not feel so comfortable with, you know, your 8-year-old sister watching or your 8-year-old kid watching, with, you know, what actually happens in the manga and the anime versus what we got. You know, some characters, their sexuality changes. Some of them, they're not ever really brought up at all. They're edited completely out, which it would have been important, I feel, at the time for lots of younger audiences to be exposed to. Yeah. But I understand, because they viewed them as cartoons.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It was always that impression that cartoons had a lot of power, and that's why they edited a lot of these things. Like with Yu-Gi-Oh!, with Sailor Moon, a lot of these things were just edited because, in a way, they thought these kids needed protection, but in reality, we just hadn't moved forward enough to be, like, comfortable with that kind of commentary. And I feel like, especially bringing that up, it felt like this whole, initially for us here in Canada, it was this whole, I know.
Oh my God, they know where we live. It's somewhere in the largest country in the world.
It's so broad.
Is Russia bigger than us? I don't remember.
I don't know. I think they are, but I'm not going to get into that. But anyway.
Come at us, Putin.
Oh, gosh. Anyways, I remember, like, when I was a kid, I know it's a different story for you, but where I was living, it was not cool to be a nerd. And so it felt very much like on the down low, where it's like you went to school and you had, like, the specific kids you trade Pokemon cards with, the specific kids you play games with. And, like, you would, at the time for me, a lot of anime wasn't on until late at night. So you thought, okay, there has to be something very adult about this for me to be, like, up this late to watch it. Because I was like, why do I have to stay up so late? Because, like, I would watch Basilisk, I would watch Cowboy Bebop, I would watch Samurai Champloo, I'd watch Inuyasha, and it was just like, why is this on only at night? There has to be something, like, adult about it that I shouldn't be, like, watching this. And it was just so, like...
I never thought about it in the terms of, like, the taboo nature of it.
Yeah.
Where I grew up, I mean, the bullying nature of it all never really hit where I came from.
Right.
I mean, just as another kind of, I think, you know, your audience will probably, you know, I can use the term nerd culture and not offend anyone, but,
I would think so.
You know, the nerd culture, like, people would openly play Magic the Gathering. Like, even the quote-unquote, the jocks would come and they'd be like, how does this work? So, I mean, you know, I was in an environment where that stuff wasn't really necessarily, it wasn't frowned upon. People weren't attacked for it. At the same point, though, again, aging myself a little bit, I'm a little older than Sugar is, that, you know, at the same point, like, everybody at the time was watching Dragon Ball Z. So, I mean, it wasn't like, you know, oh my God, I can't believe that person watches Dragon Ball Z. It's like, no, everybody was, because it was just, you know, that's how much it had already entered into mainstream culture. Right. Now, walking in and going like, oh man, did you see the newest episode of Pokemon when you're in like grade 11 or 12? Maybe not. You get a couple of blank stares, and you know, there'd be the kid in the corner like, yeah, I watched that, I love Charizard. Yeah, buddy, you know you love Charizard. Snorlax is the best Pokemon, by the way. Snorlax and Greninja.
I knew that would somehow get melded into our conversation, yeah.
I mean, you know, you gotta know something about me, and I'm a Greninja and Snorlax guy.
Exactly. That's
yeah,
hard to bypass.
You know, I never thought of it in the terms of, you know, the interest in the fact that it's kind of taboo and you're taking in something that you weren't supposed to or whatnot. For me, I remember the difficulty in getting it, at least in the 90s. I mean, Fox would air what they had. I believe Fox was also the ones who ended up getting the 4Kids stuff, so they did get, you know, Yu-Gi-Oh! Eventually,
right,
and whatnot. So, you know, they, as much as I'm going to crap all over Fox and what they did to these anime, at the same time, like, they're one of the reasons why anime has become so prevalent in North America is that they were willing to take the chance, screw it up, and kind of then, like, a group like Funimation could come in and be like, I get what you're trying to do here, but you're missing the audience. You're missing the point. And
and the problem was a lot of those episodes got butchered. Like, they were out of order. They suddenly just restarted mid, like, season. It was just a mess. Like,
anybody who watched Dragon Ball Z on YTV, that Frieza saga, boy,
that's the longest.
Yeah, they did it with the Cell saga too, where you get to the point where, like, Cell became perfect, and then it would jump all the way back to the start. Oh, it was a nightmare.
It was like Groundhog Day, but for Dragon Ball.
And any of our American fans out there, if you haven't, check out the Ocean dub, which is what we got for Dragon Ball Z, and our intro song literally was the name of the anime repeatedly.
Dragon Ball.
Dragon Ball Z! Dragon Ball Z! Yeah, that was our intro. It repeated for the entire length of the show, for the intro, and then right at the end, you hear them all, like, scream like they're powering up, and then it's like, Dragon Ball Z! That was it.
You had to know what you were watching.
Yeah, that made it a little less cool. Yeah. You know, everybody complains about Rock the Dragon compared to the Japanese version. Yeah. Give me Rock the Dragon any day over Dragon Ball.
That'd be like if you had Pokemon, and just every time a Pokemon shows up, it's Pokemon.
Pokemon now. The Pokemon intro song was actually really good.
Oh, of course it was.
I give them credit for that.
It's probably one of the well-known openers to this day. If you start singing it, someone else will sing it with you.
You know what? The repetition thing worked for Digimon as well.
Oh, yeah.
Which, it's odd to say, we make fun of the Dragon Ball Z doing it, and then Digimon, it's like, yeah, whatever. They can do what they want.
They had a couple more words and made it a little more tolerable.
That's true. Digimon are the champion.
They had steps of the evolution, you know, something about the kids, you know. It just had the very basics that you needed to know.
It's very true. People, if you're not watching Digimon Tri yet, definitely find a way to watch that, by the way.
Oh, yeah, so good. So nostalgic. Several times where I almost like... Because, of course, like we said, we grew up with Digimon, so having Tri, you're kind of revisiting a lot of those feelings you had, the characters that were developed. And it's just like... rips your heart out sometimes.
And the fact that, I mean, the versions that we've seen, obviously, I mean, we're not watching a dub. I don't even know if a dub is available yet or not for the first, you know, 3 or 4 episodes. But, like, it definitely, it takes what was actually happening, which was a little bit more adult, a little bit more geared toward teenagers. That's another thing with anime that I loved was cutting away from people being hit. All of a sudden, they just are falling on the ground.
Oh, no. A graceful wind took me down.
Yeah. It's like, ow! Why'd you do that? It's
yeah.
Like,
what do you think? Punch him?
Yeah, obviously.
All I heard was a thud, and then he's on the ground.
Boop! And they make the little cartoon noises sometimes to kind of... Oh, they slipped! There was a banana peel there on the ground. So, I mean, yeah, it's... I mean, to get back, I guess, to the original point, yeah, it's... that's how I kind of got started into anime was, you know, the same stuff any sort of, you know, 90s kid would have.
Right.
Getting further into it, like into more of, I guess, the quality, if you want to say that. You know what? I don't think that I could really hammer in an exact point where that happened. Boy, I'm just trying to think of... It probably would have been when Amazon first started up and I could start ordering in these things that everybody was talking about.
Right.
I mean, right now... almost anything you could ever want to watch is available in some capacity. Of course, that's only really been, you know, the situation, let's say, over the past 4 years or so. You know, when the internet was first starting, you know, you had Napster and LimeWire and all these sorts of things where, you know, if you wanted to try and get lucky, you could, you know, toss in, oh, I've heard of this anime, and you toss it in. And hopefully you get that, but you download it or something, and it's a bunch of porn or, you know, whatever it ended up being. So, I mean, it probably wasn't until Amazon started becoming a thing and I could start ordering in what I really wanted to watch. And I knew I was getting exactly that. The prices hadn't got, like, too high yet because it was still... It was niche enough where when they would bring it in, they wouldn't price it as high as anime is priced now because they weren't sure it was going to move.
Right.
So I could get, like, I remember, and I mean, Cowboy Bebop, now it's been reprinted and whatnot, but I remember I got a pretty good price for it back when it wasn't being, you know, printed so often. I think I got the entire series for $35-40.
Wow.
Which, that's not bad. I mean, now you might be able to go on Amazon, find it, you know, because it's been reprinted so much and it's iconic. You might be able to find it for that same price now. But
I doubt it.
I mean, you look at anime now and you go on, like, Amazon, and I mean, Cowboy Bebop, 24, 26 episodes, something like that. My Hero Academia, which we did order on Blu-ray because we love that, that was around that price, maybe even a tiny bit of a scotch higher.
Yeah, I think it was a bit more.
It might have been around that $50 mark.
Yeah. For
13 episodes. And that's actually not terrible, you know? Yeah, so that would have been when I started to, I guess, to really get into... I guess I'll say, like, higher quality or what is deemed as higher quality anime. Because, again, being in Canada, unless you had certain cable suppliers, you didn't get Toonami, which is where a lot of other people ended up getting their anime from. Was, you know, they would watch that Toonami block. They would have, like you said, you know, they'd have their Cowboy Bebop and Basilisk and Dragon Ball Z, and they continued to add more. Like, I'm so unfamiliar with the Toonami block, I couldn't tell you many of the anime that were actually on it because I didn't have it. I didn't have access to that. It just became when Amazon started stocking it and whatnot. I'd be like, oh, okay, well, I've heard this is really good. I'm going to buy it. That's how I got Seasons of Slayers. Slayers was one of my first ones where I actively went and sought it out because my rental place had the Slayers movie to rent on
really?
VHS. I remember renting it with a buddy of mine. His name's Mike, and we watched that, and our minds were blown. And I mean, not just because of a certain character who screeches in a very high voice and has extremely large breasts.
Oh,
we
Naga.
We were more.
I love her.
Naga's awesome. She's a really interesting archetype, but it wasn't just that. It was just like we were just to date this a little bit, I guess. We were just watching movie fights, and Kevin Smith was on, and he was talking about how the aim of almost anybody who's telling a story wants to make you invested in their world. That's their main thing. They want to, it's escapism. They want to take you out of your everyday life and put you into something else and make you think that it's believable and whatnot. And I mean, not to say that Slayers at all is, the pinnacle of anime. It's not even the pinnacle of, fantasy-based anime. But I got a soft spot for it because that was one of the first anime I actively went out and searched for. Right. I bought it. I watched through it. I was, very impressed. I like the fact that it's more older teen / adult themes, if you want to call it that, were respected as opposed to being actively blocked out. So that might have been the first anime that I can remember actively going out to find because I'd heard, hey, this is a good fantasy anime. They are respectful of the actual source material. That's right around the time when that started to be more important to me because I didn't know that necessarily that what we were getting in North America was super edited and that sometimes it didn't reflect at all what the initial idea was. And that when I first watched Card Captors, I didn't have a clue of what I was missing. Oh. I didn't know at the time when I was watching it, because I actually watched it as it was airing on Fox. I didn't know that they were cutting out entire storylines. They were bastardizing the characterization of certain people, that, basically homosexuality was being entirely ripped out of there. I didn't know that at the time. I had no idea.
Yeah. And that's always a learning curve, because it sounds so funny me saying it, but we're talking about anime, but even in that same vein, around the same time, a friend of mine was like, you should really get into manga if you like anime. And I'm like, why? In my brain, I didn't jive on the fact that they were melded together. They're one and the same, so to speak. And so that was my first thing. I think the very first manga I actually read to its entirety was Fruits Basket.
Okay.
And that was right away. I was like, this has an anime then. They're like, well, not necessarily, but this one does. And I said, oh, okay, great. So I always tried to compare the two. And that's, sometimes people get mad at my critiques because if I really, really love a manga, I really want the anime to be the same, because there's certain components that really won me over, whether it's the artwork like you see in Nana, or the kind of humor that you see in Fruits Basket, or in what was I going to say, in Natsume. I love everything about it, and the fact that they add in that extra component of a little extra flair of art and the music, it just works really well together and keeps that story for the most, for the majority of it. There have been some qualms I've had with certain episodes where they took some, liberties, but for the majority of the stories they tell, it's pretty verbatim from the book, and I appreciate that. And
I mean, that's something that's, existed for a long time with adaptation in general. I mean,
right. There's always movies and novels, and
that's the thing. I mean, when I first watched, The Shining, I had no idea that what was put to film was so radically different than what the novel was.
Yeah.
And I mean, I appreciate both of them on a different level. So sometimes anime and manga can do that.
Oh,
where,
completely.
And it's odd, we talk about that because I did the same thing. I bought lots of Shonen Jump. I kept, that was another kind of entry point into a little bit more into the culture of anime and manga was Shonen Jump being made available here.
Yeah.
But at the same point, some of our favorite anime are based off of light novels, and I have not
read them.
I haven't even made an attempt to read them. I don't know. Honestly, I forget if you've made a video about Steins Gate or not.
That's all good. No, I haven't yet.
But that's based off of light novels and video games and whatnot that came out before the anime. I consider it probably the best anime that I've ever seen. I don't know if I even care to read the light manga, the light novel, because I don't want the interpretation that's in the anime for me, because I know me. I know that if I read the light novel and it turns out that a few more things were more, deeply explained, some characterizations were made a little bit deeper and whatnot, I'd appreciate the anime less.
Oh, really?
I know that about me. And
oh, yeah, that's fair.
I love the Lord of the Rings movies. I think they are an absolutely fantastic adaptation of the novels. But if you actually want everything that J.R.R. Tolkien was set up to tell you, you read the books.
Yeah.
And so I feel a lot of times that happens. It's anime is a little different in the sense that the serialization of the industry and whatnot, sometimes you end up just having to fill time.
Well, that's happened lots. Well, we saw it with Full Metal Alchemist. That was
kind
of shot itself a little bit.
You know what? My thought process when it comes to filler is always going to go to Naruto first. The fact that you have literally 80 to 90 episodes of filler, and not to say that that's all bad.
No, that's the thing I was just going to point out. Like, some of the filler, you kind of cringe, you're like, why? And then there's other parts, like the fight scene with Kakashi, we were actually just talking about the other day, which is something where, like, that was good. That was good filler. Yeah, that was Kakashi, when, spoilers for Naruto Shippuden, if you haven't seen it all. There's a fight between Kakashi and Team 6. I think they're Team 6. But basically, the one that Shikamaru kind of leads. Yeah.
So there's Kakashi and that team taking on Hidan and Kakuzu. And there was basically, I think, an entire episode's worth of a fight between the four of them and Kakuzu and Hidan, which never happens at all in the manga. The manga, it ends up just being a very quick transition into Naruto coming in and showing off his new technique, and Shikamaru, of course, leading Hidan off into the middle of the woods and finishing that encounter.
Yeah.
Again, I'm trying not to spoil too much.
Try not to spoil, yeah.
So, I mean, sometimes filler can be good in that vein, but I mean, essentially 80 episodes worth between from the time skip. From the end of, again, for those who aren't familiar, I would assume you are if you're on the channel, but the original Naruto, and then from time skip, there are like 80 episodes in a row that never happened in the manga. I would say the only couple of good things that came out of it were towards the end of that filler, you kind of get a lead up into what is going to be happening in Shippuden at the first arc there, and the push for Naruto and oh god, what's her Hinata. The push for them to be I seriously don't believe they would have, again, spoilers, that they would have ended up in a relationship together if it wasn't for that filler and the fact that the fans absolutely adored that coupling. They always had, but I feel like the creators of the anime really pushing that agenda actually helped quite a bit. And it's actually interesting when you think about it that way, and you take it back to Digimon and the fact that Sora... Every fan of Digimon knows what I'm probably going to say here.
Spoilers!
Sora and Tai
and Max
should have been together. They're not at the end. And the creator literally said he did it to screw with fans. He's like, he knew what the fans wanted, and he wrote it entirely different. Because he's like, yeah, I just don't want to give the fans what they want.
Well, you see that a couple times where, I don't know what the incentive is to do that all the time. But we even saw it semi-recently when we were watching the Madoka movie, where we're like, why?
There's a lot of why when you watch Madoka. For those who maybe don't know all of Sugar's content, she isn't necessarily the biggest fan sometimes of deconstructions.
Oh, here we go.
And so something like Madoka, which is showing you the other side of being a magical girl, Sugar says explicitly that to not understand how hard it must actually be, like, you just must not pay attention. Which,
and that's not me demeaning anybody or anybody who likes the series. It's just I think I just always looked at anime critically, and I always thought of it like watching Sailor Moon. I was like, wow, like she's died a lot, and like yes, she gets revived, so to speak, and she comes back. But it's always that thing of like, obviously it's gonna be hard on your schoolwork. Obviously you're gonna have like really strained friendships. Obviously you're gonna be a cranky B-word, but it's just like.
Just as a counter, when I watched Sailor Moon, and I have watched Sailor Moon, I think it's fine. I never got that from it. Now again, the Sailor Moon we got versus what actually happened in the true anime and in the manga was very different. Again, it went through that, Fox wants to make this for kids. There was why are there kissing cousins? And that's fine. They can't just be a lesbian couple. They have to be cousins who seem to enjoy each other's company way too much. I mean, and that's a whole other issue. That's Japan has different ideology and principles on that sort of thing. But I mean, yeah, when I watched something like Sailor Moon, I never got the indication that this wasn't fun. Like, they weren't having a good time, that it wasn't awesome to essentially be like a superhero, in a way.
But you didn't watch much of Sailor Moon, did you? I just say that because, like, there are several scenes, from my perspective, where it's like, they're really suffering. They're, like, in a very bad way.
They're in pain because they're in a battle, but...
No, I don't even mean just in a battle sense, where it's just like, they cried, they were upset, they had hurt feelings.
Yeah, but they're teenage girls.
Oh, jeez. Wow. Wow.
That was my mentality before I became a little bit more mature in my understanding of things. I'm just saying that when I first watched it, that was not the thing. And again, the only other, because I didn't seek out magical girl anime, that wasn't really what I was looking for. The only other magical girl one that I had watched was Cardcaptor Sakura, which again, I can't say it glorifies being a magical girl, but it's like, you get all these cool powers, you get, like, these cool friends, you get
another girl that makes your outfits.
You get these awesome adventures. And where I felt like Madoka really hit it, where it was like, yeah, you get all this stuff, but you pay dearly for it, and you're constantly at the threat of death. Yeah. That's the part that I took from it. For the record, I think Madoka's maybe a 6.5 to a 7 if we're doing it on a 10-point scale. Mm-hmm. The last movie, unless there's a payoff, that last movie was garbage, and nobody can convince me otherwise unless there's a huge payoff with whatever happens next in Madoka. Then I'll be like, that was a stroke of brilliance. But currently, right now, as it is, I'm like, oh wow, that's like an hour and a half of my life I will never get back.
I just remember, like, Madoka itself, there's not much I can say about it. Like, it was just okay for me. I don't find it did anything super special. I found it just brought it to a much darker side of what I already imagined happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But as for the movie, yeah, we watched it as a group. A bunch of our friends came over, plopped it in, and all of us were kind of like, had already watched Madoka already. So the fact that we were watching and kind of looking at each other like, wow, what's happening? It's just too much symbolism. There was just too much, just everything. It was just a mess. And
it was a combination of different symbols that don't really seem to mesh.
Different religions, like storytelling, like it was just all over the place. Like,
and like I said, there could be a huge payoff later where that's where like all of that symbolism is meshed because like all like the witch time stuff was starting to like bend realities together or something. Like it's possible that this could all be saved, but I don't see that happening.
Like it might even, but I doubt it. I was doing material, like, looking up every single part of that movie, and there's just so much stuff. There's, like, from every culture, every religion, everything you can imagine. Like, it's just so out there, and it's hard to weave all these things together unless you know the exact idea behind
and it doesn't make for effective storytelling.
No.
Is the long and short of it. It
basically becomes a worse art film.
Like it felt to me like they were either they had no idea what they were doing,
right,
or they were going for such a high concept that they just totally missed the mark on all of it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're no stranger to deeply analyzing.
Yeah.
To deep analysis. I mean, your Baccano video
was long.
Not just long, but it was very in depth, and it looked at things from a lot of different sources and whatnot. So it's not like it's an impossibility, but it definitely felt like that felt very genuine, whereas this felt very muddled and like they were throwing some stuff at a wall and seeing what stuck.
Yeah, like Baccano will always hold a place in my heart. I know it's not like top of the top. It's not the best anime ever.
That intro, though, top 10.
Intro, damn.
Top 10 intro.
But just the story itself.
Cowboy Bebop's is better.
Oh, Lord. It melds things so well. Just the fact that there's not really anything for filler. They have really great character development. They have interesting, like, personalities. You have all this stuff with religion and tarot cards. And you have everything that works in beautifully without, like, really taking away from one aspect or the other. It's like, wow, that's really great music. That's really great artwork. That's a really great character. Wow, I love it. And it's just great in that way. And I pop it in all the time. Jeff sees me watch it a lot, a sickening degree.
Hey, I mean, you love what you love, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know what? If I could watch Back to the Future on a daily basis, I probably would. It's maybe not feasible. It's interesting to talk about anime that you rewatch, because like some of the anime that I've considered like the best out of what I've seen, I haven't rewatched. I haven't taken the time to rewatch it. You tend to do that a little bit more than I do.
Yeah.
Where you'll take it in and get more from it maybe the second time around. If you looked at like my MAL, my anime list, for those who aren't on the website, you should. It's a really easy way to catalog what you've seen and what you haven't. But like the anime that I consider to be like the best, I'd mentioned Steins Gate, Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, Cowboy Bebop I've rewatched a couple of times now, so I have done that one quite a bit. But yeah, FMA Brotherhood I've only watched through the one time. Steins Gate I've only watched through so far the once. I do intend to watch it again at some point. It's just, boy, there's so much. There's so much to watch.
Oh, like just in general for anime?
Oh, yeah.
Or you mean just Steins Gate?
No, just anime in general.
Oh, of course. There's tons of anime. Like
I feel bad if I'm rewatching something as opposed to watching something new. Like, I mean, both you and I, and this might surprise the audience, but both you and I have never watched Neon Genesis Evangelion, and that's supposed to be, it's supposed to be, this absolute classic that has redefined genres, and again, it's a deconstruction, so I don't know how that will go for you versus, lots of other anime.
But I think it might hit more for me because I don't honestly watch a lot of mechs, like shows about mechs or anything in that vein. Like, really, the only thing I can say was like Escaflowne was kind of in that vein. And other than that, like, I haven't watched a lot of mechs, but it's just kind of the fact that when I started watching them, it was just the fact that they kind of had the same story all the time, where it's like, I have a robot, you do too, we hate each other, let's just destroy each other, and then one of us will be left standing.
I will say I did watch probably a season,
a
couple
the
of seasons
Transformers.
of I don't think that's considered anime though.
The movie, I think, is.
No, I don't think so. I think that was all Western done.
There
are anime versions of Transformers.
There's so many, because like even when I was younger,
there's Japanese versions, and there was, interestingly enough, I work at a video game store. Big surprise, right? Anime nerd, and I work at a video game store. We got in the Japanese version of Transformers, like the anime version, and just it was very strange. I thought you meant the 80s, with
no.
airing right next to G.I. Joe,
No.
no. That's, you know what? That's not bad.
I did watch it, but I knew very well that was very Western.
I watched Mobile Suit Gundam, and definitely there is room. I don't watch a lot of mech anime at all. That being said, I would argue most of the really good Gundam series, they're actually more like political in nature, and that the mechs are more, they're machines of war.
Yeah.
They are, just like if you were to have an anime based on the Cold War, the nukes aren't the main focal point. That just happens to be what they could use, in terms of warfare.
Yeah.
So like Mobile Suit Gundam was very much about, it was about the politics behind it and the stories you could tell in this world that existed.
Right.
So I mean, it's possible. I know a lot about Neon Genesis Evangelion just because of how ubiquitous it is, about how
Well, it's such
how
a...
important it is.
Yeah.
I don't know what the MAL rating would be on it, but it's got to be pretty high.
I'm probably...
High 8s.
Lots of people have watched it, and I've never really heard anything terrible about it, so I'm assuming it's pretty decent.
All I've heard is that the ending is kind of muddled, and that all the movies don't necessarily tie the threads, and that it becomes like an existential crisis when you watch it, and you're like, I don't know what's happening anymore, but I feel really bad about it. That sort of thing.
Yeah, I guess the other mech one I guess you could consider is Gurren Lagann. That was the one that kind of seemed more different to me. But that's why I kind of saw interest. Where I was like, wow, the art style is like really neat. And I was like, I like this concept of it just kind of being, you know, there's stories behind stories of it. And then like in the end where I don't want to spoil anything, but just kind of the absurdity it reaches.
That was the point of Gurren Lagann, I think, is I don't know if that's how you're supposed to pronounce it. I know
everyone pronounces it differently, but it's Gurren Lagann.
I believe the creator even said towards the end, he was like, I want to see how absurd I can go with it.
Right.
That was the whole point.
And that's the thing, it's kind of a spectacle in itself of it just being kind of crazy.